Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to this public hearing of the New York City Rent Guidelines Board. This is the fifth of 5 public hearings to consider comments concerning proposed rent adjustments for renewal leases for apartments, lofts, hotels, and other housing units subject to the Rent Stabilization Law of 1969 and the Emergency Tenant Protection Act of 1974. These adjustments will affect renewal leases commencing between October 1, 2018 through September 30th, 2019. I will now take roll call. Please respond if present. Hillary Botín.
Present.
Rodrigo Camarena.
Present.
Shayla Garcia is absent. Leah Goodrich.
Present.
Cecilia Hosa.
Present.
Angela Pinsky. Present. David Reese is not with us. Scott Walsh.
Present.
And Kathleen Roberts, I'm here. Let the record show that we have a quorum. The next meeting of this board will be the final vote, which will take place on June 26th, starting at 7 p.m. It will be held in the Great Hall at Cooper Union, 7 East 7th Street in Manhattan. Directions to this meeting can be found on our website, nyc.gov/RGB. And as always, there are copies of our meeting schedule here tonight. I'd like to thank you all for attending this public hearing. The board is looking forward to hearing from many of you regarding the proposed rent adjustment guidelines. Based upon testimony we've heard in previous years, we know that many of you have concerns about housing conditions and various aspects of rent regulation that may be beyond the mandate of this board. In order to help address these concerns, we have here this evening, for the first time in the history of these hearings, representatives of the New York City Department of Housing Preservation and Development, HPD, and the New York State Homes and Community Renewal, HCR, who are available to answer questions and provide advice. They are located in the lobby. The board very much appreciates their willingness to participate in these hearings. Before we proceed with testimony, I would like to go over the rules and procedures for those who will be testifying before the board. If you wish to speak, you must confirm your presence with the RGB staff at the registration table located near the entrance of the hall. Speaker registration ends at 8 p.m. Speakers will not be called if they have not checked in at the registration table. There is a Spanish interpreter here today. When registering to speak, please notify the staff if you would like an interpreter. I will try to call several names in advance. When your name is called, please come to the front of the auditorium toward the podium. If you have materials to distribute to the board, you should give them to the RGB staff sitting at the sign-in table near the entrance. I will attempt to alternate speakers between tenants and owners, but this may not always be possible. In order to accommodate as many speakers as possible, each speaker will have 2 minutes to give their testimony. An additional 2 minutes of speaking time will be given to those speakers utilizing interpretation services. To help speakers keep track of their time, we have a clock. We will start the clock when you begin speaking. The clock will beep once when the speaker has 30 seconds left. We'll continue beeping when the allotted 2 minutes are up. If you're still speaking at the end of 2 minutes, I will ask you to quickly wrap up your testimony. We expect many speakers, and the board wants to hear from as many speakers as possible in the limited time we have for this hearing. We understand that it may be difficult to say everything you want us to hear in just 2 minutes, but please understand that it is our responsibility to make sure that everyone who has taken the time to come here and testify will have a fair opportunity to be heard. So we thank you in advance for your cooperation. And now I'd like to ask the Spanish interpreter to translate the announcements. Thank you.
Buenas noches a todos. Me gustaría darle la bienvenida a esta audiencia pública del Comité para Regulaciones de Alquileres de la Ciudad de Nueva York. Esta es la última de las 5 audiencias públicas que se darán o se harán para tomar en consideración los comentarios sobre los ajustes de alquiler propuestos para los contratos de renovación de apartamentos, lofts, hoteles y otras unidades de vivienda sujetos a la Ley de Estabilización de Alquiler de 1969 y la Ley de Protección de Inquilinos de Emergencia de 1974. Estos ajustes afectarán a los contratos de renovación de arrendamiento a partir del 1 de octubre de 2018 hasta el 30 de septiembre de 2019. La próxima reunión de esta Junta será para la votación final que tendrá lugar el 26 de junio a partir de las 7 de la noche. Se llevará a cabo en el Great Hall, el Gran Salón en Cooper Union, en el 7 este de la calle 7 en Manhattan. Las instrucciones para esta reunión se pueden encontrar en nuestro sitio web nyc.gov/RGB. Y como siempre, hay copias de nuestro calendario de reuniones aquí esta noche. Les agradezco a todos por haber asistido a esta audiencia pública. El comité desea escuchar a muchos de ustedes acerca de las pautas de ajuste de alquiler que se han propuesto. Basándonos en el testimonio que hemos escuchado en años anteriores, sabemos que muchos de ustedes aquí tienen inquietudes acerca de las condiciones de vivienda y varios aspectos de la reglamentación de los alquileres que pueden estar más allá del mandato de este comité. Con el fin de ayudarles a abordar estas preocupaciones, este año, por primera vez en la historia de estas audiencias, los representantes del Departamento de Preservación y Desarrollo de los Hogares del Estado de Nueva York, o HPD, y también el Departamento de Renovación Comunitaria, HCAR, están disponibles para responder a sus preguntas y darles consejos. Ellos están ubicados en el vestíbulo. El comité aprecia mucho su voluntad de participar en esta audiencia. Antes de continuar con el testimonio, me gustaría repasar las reglas y procedimientos para los que vayan a testificar ante el comité esta noche. Si desea hablar, debe confirmar su presencia con el personal de RGB o la Junta de Pautas de Alquileres según sus siglas en inglés, en la mesa de registro que está ubicada cerca de la entrada principal. El registro de los presentadores terminará a las 8 de la noche. Los presentadores no se llamarán si no se han registrado con esta mesa de registro. Habrá interpretación en español esta noche. Cuando se registre para hablar, por favor, notifique al personal si usted desea un intérprete. Voy a tratar de llamar a varios nombres a la vez. Cuando se llame su nombre, por favor, pase al frente del auditorio, al podio que ha sido habilitado. Si usted tiene materiales para distribuirle al comité, debe dárselos al personal de RGB sentado en la mesa de la entrada principal antes de empezar. Intentaré alternar a los oradores entre inquilinos y propietarios, pero esto puede no ser siempre posible. Para dar cabida a tantos oradores como sea posible, cada orador tendrá 2 minutos para testificar. Se darán 2 minutos adicionales de tiempo de intervención a los oradores que utilicen los servicios de interpretación. Para ayudar a los oradores a hacer un seguimiento de su tiempo, tenemos un reloj disponible. Empezaremos el reloj cuando usted empiece a hablar. El reloj emitirá un pitido una vez que al presentador le falten solo 30 segundos. Continuará pitando cuando los 2 minutos asignados se hayan acabado. Si usted sigue hablando al final de esos 2 minutos, le pediré que por favor acabe rápidamente su testimonio. Esperamos a muchos oradores y el comité quiere escuchar de tantos oradores como sea posible en el tiempo limitado que tenemos para esta audiencia. Entendemos que puede ser difícil decir todo lo que usted quiere que oigamos en solo 2 minutos, pero por favor entienda que es nuestra responsabilidad asegurarnos de que todos los que se hayan tomado el tiempo de venir acá esta noche para testificar tengan una oportunidad justa de ser escuchados. Gracias por su cooperación.
Thank you. The first 3 speakers are John Marr, Linnell Lacedo, and Yvonne Dennis. Good evening. Thank you for coming to testify.
Good evening, Madam Chairperson, members of the board. My name is John Marr, Law Office of John Marr. I addressed you 2 nights ago at Cooper Union.
Yes, I think we need you to speak closer to the microphone.
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
Okay, following my appearance on 2 days ago, 4 or 5 landlords spoke. I'm sure that at least 2 of those landlords misrepresented the basis for rent increase. I want to address that. My office has represented several of the tenants of Doreen Alderman who spoke in Basil's eviction cases, one of which is still ongoing. She's the landlord of 91 East 3rd Street. She owns 2 other properties in the East Village, both with more than 10 residential tenants, and we have examined her tax bills and RPI statements. What Alderman didn't tell you is that, according to her RPI, her gross income has gone up from $1.15 million in 2011 to $1.5 million today. and her net operating income has increased from $435,000 to $587,000, an increase of 1/3 in 7 years. Based on this data, we see that while Alderman's expenses increased by 46% from 2011 to 2017, and her taxes increased by nearly 18%. Despite these increases, her NOI still increased by 33%. She's already taking home nearly $600,000 a year from her 3 properties. I can tell you that she conducts business while enjoying Equitage in France. Her testimony provides no credible reason for an RGB rent increase. Next, we researched landlord Christopher Athenios. Like Alderman, he also complained about increases in his cost. Let me give the board a sense of what his actual holdings are. According to the DOB, an HBD has 9 buildings, only 53 of 145 units are rent stabilized. He's already making an income of $1.25 million, and between 2001 and 2017, his net profits increased by over 20%. His testimony provides no credible reason for an RGB rent increase. His total income on his portfolio of 9 buildings was over $2.3 million in 2011 and is over $2.8 million today. This is not the basis for a rent increase. I will be submitting a further detailed statement with spreadsheets on data, and I thank you for listening to me. Please do not increase the rent this year. There's no justifiable basis in the record for doing so. Thank you both. Thank you all.
Thank you. Linnell Salcedo. Good evening. Thank you for coming to testify.
Good evening. My name is Linnell, and I'm the housing specialist at Assemblymember O'Donnell's, and I'll be speaking on his behalf today. Dear board members, good evening. My name is Daniel O'Donnell, and I'm a member of the New York State Senate Assembly, 69th Assembly District, representing the Upper West Side, Morningside Heights, and Manhattan Valley. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the proposed increases for rent-stabilized tenants in New York City for the 2018 through 2019 cycle. The importance of rent stabilization cannot be overstated in the lives of my constituents and for millions of New Yorkers. At this time, there are 1 million rent-stabilized tenants in New York City, making it the city's largest affordable housing stock. As it stands, I am very disappointed by the preliminary ranges that do not include an option for a rent freeze. These ranges do not reflect that landlords have continued to make increases in their net operating income for 12 years, and that income increases have lagged, particularly for the lowest earners. Currently, many rent-stabilized apartments are being lost due to evictions for non-payment. In my district, rent-stabilized tenants come to my office and regularly request assistance with paying their rent. The typical rent-stabilized tenant has to deal with many difficult situations that threaten their ability to afford and live in the city that they love and where they have formed friendships, established families, and forged community ties. For many New Yorkers in rent-stabilized apartments, the reality is that rent is not a reasonable portion of their wages and income. If rents continue to rise, long-standing New York residents, many of whom reside in my district, will be pushed out. As per the 2018 Income and Expense Study by the Rent Guidelines Board, wages have decreased despite reported positive economic indicators. Therefore, many of the tenants who reside in rent-stabilized apartments cannot meet their living expenses and will not be able to afford a rent increase. Raising rents will make it even more difficult to pay for necessities such as transportation and food. As there is no rent freeze being offered this year, we urge that you vote for the lowest increase possible. Thank you for the time and attention to this important matter. Please feel free to contact me if you need assistance. Sincerely, Daniel O'Donnell.
Thank you. Yvonne Dennis. Good evening. Thank you for coming to testify.
Thank you for allowing me. OCO, I'm Yvonne Dennis, a Cherokee, Lenape, Sand Hill citizen, as well as a New York City resident. Imagine our beloved city without teachers, sanitation workers, laborers, police officers, librarians, theater employees, firemen, nannies, cashiers, doormen, wait staff, nurses, dry cleaners, retail staff, EMTs, utility and transit workers, janitors, cabbies, office workers, and all others who live on modest incomes, yet provide services and lifelines that benefit us all. The wealthy cannot live without all the folks who perform essential tasks that we take for granted. Workers like myself are the foundation and the walls of this great city, yet we can't afford housing. Forget about the concept of being fair and equitable. Does it make sense to remove the floors and walls of your house? My ancestors were here from the beginning, long before New York City was a whisper. A segment of our international trade route is now what you call Broadway. The pollution, chaos, and destruction of our sacred lands makes this beautiful part of the world unrecognizable to those who came before us. Yet we are still here in spite of being displaced in every century, including this one. Our children become responsible adults and give back to our community, yet they cannot afford to live here. Imbalance is not healthy for any of us, not First Peoples and not the newbies. No rent hike. Housing is mandatory for us all. To date, none of us real workers has grown gills so that we can live beneath the Hudson River. I respectfully quote the Venerable Chief Sitting Bull. Let us put our minds together to see what life we can make for our children. Wanishi Donada.
Thank you. The next three speakers are Delsenia Glover, Lena Melendez, and Patricia Rosario.
Good
Good
evening.
evening. Thank you for coming in to testify.
Thank you. My name is Delsenia Glover. I am here to represent tenants and neighbors, the Central Harlem Tenants Alliance, and the Lenox Terrace Association of Concerned Tenants.
Can you speak a little closer to the microphone? Thank you.
I am here to represent tenants and neighbors, the Central Harlem Tenants Alliance, and the Lenox Terrace Association of Concerned Tenants. We come before this board every year and we beg and plead for the best or no increase for tenants. We are still here to request a zero increase for tenants this session. We understand that you have numbers that you look at to determine what the increase will be. But what you should consider in your deliberation is that the tenants in this room are still reeling from the financial crisis, and they are still reeling for the exorbitant increases of the previous administration, culminating in about an 8.5% increase in 2009. What you also need to consider is that even if you don't give an increase in the rent for landlords, landlords will still make their money. Consider that approximately 30% of rent-regulated units now have what they call preferential rents. And what this means is that the landlord can raise those rents anywhere up to the legal regulated rent, which can sometimes be 15 or even 20%. If the landlord in a building or a complex like mine, where 30% of the tenants maybe have preferential rents, if they give those tenants a 10% increase, that's like raising the rents for everyone in the complex 2%. So what I'm here to tell you is that with MCI's preferential rents, vacancy bonus because of tenants being pushed out of the apartments and they get a 20% increase, the landlords are doing just fine, but the tenants are not. Tenants are struggling. We have many seniors in the complex who are on fixed incomes, but they don't qualify for screen. They may make a few $100 or $1,000 over the screen limit, and they are not getting any more income except for what their fixed income is. So these people are very worried about their futures because and a lot of rent-regulated tenants who are in apartments that are not preferential rents, they're older people on fixed incomes, and they cannot afford an increase. So I would beg you to consider with all of the income that's coming into landlords and property owners, and you see the booming going on in this city. Our landlord right now is considering adding
Excuse me, your time is up. Could you wind up your testimony, please?
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
Is considering adding 5 luxury towers to the Lenox Terrace property. If they were not getting enough income from the buildings that already exist, they wouldn't be able to build more buildings. So, do the right thing, as I asked last year, and give tenants a rent freeze. Thank you.
Thank you. Lena Melendez. Good evening.
Hi.
Thank you for coming in.
Hi, thank you. My name is Lena Melendez, and I am a tenant. Tenants of rent-regulated apartments are under siege. We are under siege by the racist rezonings, motivated by greed by our city officials who are in collusion with landlords and REBNY. We are under siege when they put profits before people, and the majority of new units are beyond and out of reach financially for most of us. Our rent-regulated apartments are being decimated as they allow buildings to go into disrepair, and with the help of the city, the agencies like the fire department and the Department of Buildings, with the help of these agencies, tenants are being vacated. And once out of their homes, they're not allowed back. Like in the case of 185 Bauer Street, like in the case of 600 West 161st Street, tenants are under siege, and when they get MCI increases to the tune of $45 per room per month, more up and above their rent, and retired, disabled, and elderly folks are on fixed incomes. Rent-regulated tenants are under siege when landlords neglect to cash rent checks for months on end, hoping tenants will use the money, and then they get taken to court for non-payment. Rent-regulated tenants are under siege when they get their rent statement late and then they get charged late fees. Rent-regulated tenants are under siege when harassed by landlords who ask for passports, social security numbers, which is illegal, for new fob keys, and they charge extra money for anything over 2 fob keys, which is also illegal. Tenants are under siege when they are lured out of their rent-stabilized apartments and offered preferential rent lease apartments and get their rents spiked, as is the case with one of my neighbors. Tenants are under siege when the landlords split apartments into 2, creating more income for themselves, but hazardous conditions for tenants of apartments with only 1 mode of egress. Tenants, elderly tenants, 84-year-old people, 90-year-old blind lady, they receive 10-day notices, the landlord just wants them out. They can't afford market rate rent, so what are they supposed to do, go to SROs and eat cat food? Tenants are under siege when they want to privatize NYCHA. I mean, we're under siege here. We're poor. Poor people are being crushed under the weight of many, many forces. The increase of price of food, transportation, clothing, gas, don't add to that burden by increasing the price of rent, too.
Excuse me, your time's up. Could you wrap up your testimony, please?
Yes, for some, a rent increase can send them over a financial precipice. We need a rent rollback. Thank you.
Thank you. Patricia Rosario. Good evening. Thank you for coming in to testify.
Well, I'll make it very short. I was born and raised in New York City, and right now it's like I'm struggling seeing how the rent is just going high and trying to have work to survive and pay the rent. So please keep us in mind, and let's try not to increase our rent. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. The next 3 speakers are Luis Rivera, Beatriz Aguilar, and Figueroa Magali.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for
evening.
coming
Hi.
in to testify.
Hi, thank you, board members. My name is Luis Rivera. I'm a member of Fast Food Justice. I attended the last housing hearing, and I heard stories about substandards and unaffordable housing. The elderly being evicted out for profit. What does that say about our society? Things like that brought tears to my eyes when I actually heard this testimony from certain people. You know, and I picture that being my mother or my grandmother, you know, and I said, wow, unbelievable. I'm a 47-year-old male sleeping in my mother's living room. I can't afford the rent increases. I'm not the only one, so it's important to make sure that there is a healthy stock of rent-stabilized housing so that we can live in diverse and inclusive neighborhoods. That's why fast food workers are organizing around affordable housing. We are coming together to change our lives and communities. So I'm here in the solidarity with a rent-stabilized tenant fighting for a rent freeze today because I know we cannot afford another rent increase. It's out of control. Rents are hurting people. Stabilize the rent so we can live in the city, decent, affordable housing. I'm out of work because of the rent increase. Panera Bread decided not to afford their new lease and they let 2 stores close down just because of the rent increase. 30 of my co-workers are now unemployed and 15 of them have been transferred to other locations to work, you know, for near nothing. You know, on a transfer to another location, you have to be accommodated. And that means that everybody else that's working at that establishment will have to share their time with other people's time. You know, please, let's not ruin New York. Let's keep it the way it is. Let's keep it the great city that it's always been. Thank you.
Thank you. Beatrice Aguilar. Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for coming in to testify.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm going to read in Spanish for the name of a member of... Hola, soy Beatriz.
Just a moment.
Yes.
Let's wait for this to pass. Good evening. Welcome. We would like to proceed with the testimony.
What do we want? Rent free! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Rent free! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Rent free! When do we want it? Now! What we need? Rent free! When do we want it? Now! What do we need? Rent free! When do we need it? Now! What do we need? Rent free! When do we need it? Now! What do we need? Tell me! Rent free! When do we need it? Now! What do we need? Rent free! When do we need it? Now! What do we need? Rent free! When do we need it? Now! What do we need? Rent free! When do we need it? Now! What do we need? Rent free! When do we need it? Now! What do we need? Rent free! When do we need it? Now! What do we need? Rent free! When do we need it? Now! What do we need? Rent free! When do we need it? Now! Rent free! When do we need it? Now! What do we need? Rent free! When do we need it? Now! What do we need? Rent free! When do we need it? Now! What do we need? Rent free! When do we need it? Now! What do we need? Rent free! When do we need it? Now! What do we need? Rent free! When do we need it? Now! What do we need? Rent free! When do we need it? Now! Rent free! When do we need it? Now! What do we need? Rent free! When do we need it? Now! What do we need? Rent free! When do we need it? Now! What do we need? Rent free! When do we need it? Now!
We have 25 speakers who are waiting to testify. Beatrice Aguilar, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on your board. I'm a member of Fast Food Justice, and I'm here like everybody else working in for our own living. I live in public housing, and I know that as a fast food worker, we are earning more money, but that does not imply that we are able to afford all the public housing, transportation, food, and all the other necessities that we need, living especially in the city of New York. We are here as a Fast Food Justice member to remind you and to plead, I guess, beg you to consider the factors of us living in public housing. We know that we have to pay for water, we know that we have to pay for the amount of air conditioners that we have, but we also need you to be considerate of the amount that you're increasing each year, and every single time you might affect how we live, whether we stay in the building or not. So we implore you to please be considerate and be, I guess, have mercy or be human just like we are, to not increase the rent as much as we would love to. Thank you.
Thank you. Figueroa Magali.
What do we want? Rent free! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Rent free! When do we want it? Now! Woo!
Good evening. Thank you for coming in to testify.
Good evening, Board Chair and members of the board. My name is Magali Figueroa, and I am a tenant at 50 West 93rd Street. I have lived here for 35 years. I can't afford another rent increase because I work for a nonprofit organization who help people living with mental illness. I don't make much money working for that nonprofit. I'm divorced, living with a daughter who has a learning disability and has not been able to support herself. I work very hard, but I worry that if anything breaks down in my apartment and it is replaced, whether it's the refrigerator or the stove, with something new, I will be charged extra on top of my rent. I've lived here for 35 years and nothing has been replaced or updated in my apartment. I am a good tenant. I want to remain in my home. It is the only home I've known. I'm asking for your understanding of what my concerns are and how I can continue to stay in my home. Thank you for giving me the time and the opportunity, and for you taking the time to listen to this. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Assemblymember Harvey Epstein.
Rent free! When do we want it? Now!
Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. It's kind of funny standing over here. To the new members, welcome. My name is Harvey Epstein. I'm a former board member of the Rent Guidelines Board and the assembly member from the 74th Assembly District, representing the east side of Manhattan, Peter Cooper Village, Stuyvesant Town, Murray Hill, Tudor City, and the East Village. I have before you a letter from, you okay, Scott? Sorry about your arm. By 36 assembly members representing all parts of New York City, talking about the housing crisis that we have. 36 members from every borough saying that tenants need a rent freeze. So not only these 36 members, but I'm here to speak on behalf of the rent-stabilized tenants that live in my district. Like all the tenants in the city, they need a rent freeze. Thinking about what we're talking about, the affordable housing crisis. We are all in a struggle. Tenants in my district and across the city need a 0% increase. And if you can't do that, but I still think you can, you have to pass the lowest possible increases possible. While it's disappointing that you haven't put a zero in the range, you haven't recognized the worsening housing and homelessness crisis, weathering especially this grave period of federal disinvestment in our affordable housing that really could be exacerbated by a shortage of housing. As some members of my colleagues, we point out in our letter, owners are facing overwhelmingly favorable conditions compared to what rent-stabilized tenants are faced with. For owners, marginal increase in operating costs, they have net operating costs of gone up for 12 years in a row. That won't make a difference for them. The marginal increase that you're potentially proposing won't make a difference in their bottom line, but it will make a difference in the housing crisis for millions of rent-stabilized tenants across the city. Thank you. In addition, we've heard that wages have stagnated. Remove the data and the finance data, if you take out the insurance sector, which skews the data, real wages have declined. Tenants, as you know, are living on the edge. Even a small increase, as I've said, pushes them closer to homelessness. The number of distressed properties have fallen to the lowest in record history, according to the income and expense data. An overwhelming majority, 9% of these buildings are pre-war buildings, have the lowest operating net cost of rent-stabilized buildings. Many of these pre-war properties could be candidates for HPD programs, 8A loan programs, other programs if that's the problem. Shifting the cost to tenants right now is not the answer. For these reasons and all outlined in the letter we've submitted, we strongly urge you to propose a one-year rent freeze for rent-stabilized tenants. It is what's right for the city, it's right for the 2.5 million tenants, it's right for the future in New York, and it's right for the Rent Guidelines Board. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Any questions? No questions? The first time
How do you like being in Albany?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's a real opportunity to make a difference for rent-stabilized tenants because right now, as we know, the deregulation of units, in the last 12 years, we've seen 250,000 units leave the rent-stabilized market at the lower end. The chance to change that is with you and people like me in Albany. So we have to be a team on this. I really believe in affordable housing. I really believe in our jobs. Your job and my job is to protect the most vulnerable New Yorkers while ensuring owners can continue to make a profit. That's our job. I think we've skewed too far, as you all know, that owners are doing well. Net operating income cannot continue to rise if owners are not doing well. Foreclosures are down to almost nothing. You can see it. The losses, income losses are down to almost nothing. You can see the trend. You see it in my neighborhood. I see it with my friends. I see it across the city. So many people call my office now, and the 1% increase on a one-year lease will mean they will be homeless. Let's just be clear about this. I said it before when I was up there, but I'll say it now. Constituents call my office and say, I can barely make it. if my rent goes up, I will be homeless. And that cost to us, cost to the city, cost to the future of New York, and the cost of losing that rent-stabilized apartment is severe. So thank you for the question, and I'm happy to continue to work with you in whatever way you need to improve the lives of tenants and ensure why owners are still being able to maintain their living.
Thank you. The next three speakers are Karen Skibel, Violetta Luis, and Robert Jackson. What? I will, yeah, in a moment. Karen Skibel? Okay. Karen Skibel is our first speaker. No, just a moment. First is Ms. Skibel, and then Ms. Louise. Thank you. Thank you for coming in to testify.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Karen Skybell. I'm a tenant at 25 West 132nd Street in Lenox Terrace. I've lived at 25 West 132nd Street in my same apartment in Lenox Terrace for 9 years. My landlord is Hampton Management. Along with half of New Yorkers, I'm rent burdened. My rent has been at the highest, 63% of my income. It has been 43% of my income, and it's currently lower, but still 35% of my income. This has affected me because I work multiple jobs. Currently, I'm working overtime. I average 13-hour days. It's impacting my health. It's impacting my stress. If my rent increases even 1%, I will have to pick up a second part-time job, already working overtime. New York needs a rent freeze. With the egregious economic disparity in this country, New York has the opportunity to take the lead to protect its citizens, its renters. New York often takes the lead. New York is the lead. We're the Big Apple. This is a critical juncture in our country and in our city. Please help New Yorkers. I don't know what I would do if I had a family to feed. I realize my situation is not easy, but others have it worse. And I speak today on behalf of everyone. Please, please enact a rent freeze. It would help so much, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Violetta Luis. You need interpretation? Just a moment.
Sí. O yo lo digo ahora. Ok. Hola, mi nombre es Violeta y soy miembro de una organización sin fines de lucro fundada por trabajadores y trabajadoras de comida rápida, como yo, en defensa de mejorar las normas de la vida de tanto en nuestro empleo como en nuestras comunidades. Quiero empezar por darle las gracias a la Junta de Directrices de Renta por permitirme testificar por esta noche.
Just a moment. Let's just, excuse me, Miss Luis. Just take a pause so we can get the interpretation, please.
Hello, my name is Violeta. I am a member of a nonprofit organization, and we represent fast food workers in defense of better working conditions for our jobs and our communities. I want to begin by saying thank you to the board for allowing us to testify tonight.
Los trabajadores de comida rápida, como yo, nos hemos organizado para mejorar nuestra vida. Hemos luchado por horario justo y lo hemos ganado. Para fines de año estaremos ganando 15 por hora. Como trabajadores de comida rápida, que tenemos turno de casi tiempo completo, de todas formas no podemos pagar la vivienda digna en nuestra comunidad.
Excuse me, let's get the interpretation. Thank you.
Fast food workers, we have been organized to improve our lives. We have fought for better hours, just wages, and we've won. And at the end of the year, we're going to be earning $15 an hour. And as fast food workers, we have almost full-time or long shifts, and it's very difficult for us to have a dignified life in this city.
Cerca de una tercera parte de los miembros de fast food vivimos en edificios de renta estabilizada y muchos otros viven en la calle porque la renta sigue subiendo y los sueldos no nos dan igual de rápido para tener cómo pagarla.
So about 1/3 of the members of Fast Food Justice, we live in rent-stabilized apartments, and some of us live on the streets because the rent keeps going up, and our wages stay the same. And it's very difficult for us to be able to pay for this.
Necesitamos una ciudad con vivienda digna y económica para todo. Y para lograr llegar a eso tenemos un congelamiento de renta para que los inquilinos de renta estabilizada
we need to have just housing, and we need to have economic justice for all of us. And in order to be able to have that, we need a rent freeze for all renters, and especially people who have rent-stabilized apartments.
Yo estoy aquí en solidaridad con los inquilinos de renta estabilizada, luchando por un congelamiento de renta hoy. Yo siento que tengo suerte de tener vivienda, pero no es igual a la otra persona.
And that is why I'm here today, and I'm in solidarity with rent-stabilized tenants, and I'm here to fight for a rent freeze for everyone today. And I am grateful that I have housing, but it isn't ideal.
Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Jackson.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for coming to
Well, thank you for
testify.
having me. My name is Robert Jackson. I'm a former member of the New York City Council from Northern Manhattan, and I'm currently a Democratic Party district leader and running for State Senate of New York in the 31st Senatorial. And I'm a member of Northern Manhattan is not for sale. For the past 2 decades, but even more so within the last few years, we have seen an epidemic of abuse and displacement of tenants as private equity firms acquire buildings with high concentration of rent-regulated apartments. These predatory firms, which purchase buildings at 30 or 40 times the rent roll, immediately get to work pushing out tenants by any means necessary. Yet the RSA and RIBNY want us to believe that the landlords are hurting. However, the fact is that the net operating income for property owners grew by 4.4%. This is the 12th year in a row that the net operating income has increased. And the NOI rose even during the 2 years that the rent guideline boards froze the rent increase for 1-year leases. So where do we go? Well, where do these profits go? They are certainly not going into building repairs in my district, Northern Manhattan. And I see conditions in some buildings, many owners by major firms are simply deplorable. Tenants are forced to pay bills in the form of MCIs and individual apartment improvement increases. And at the same time, private equity firms are taking full advantage of the failure of the state oversight, something I plan to fight for and fix in Albany, and violating the terms of J51 and other tax abatements by illegally deregulating apartments by any means they possibly can, that they can get away with. And some of them need to be arrested and put in jail. And contrary to the RSA and RIBNY, they want everyone to believe that rent regulated is not a welfare program. It's a vital corrective to a market that is wildly distorted in favor of big real estate. Rent regulated and public housing are the last safeguards preventing New York City from becoming nothing more than a luxury product for the transient rich from around the world. Please, for the tenants of Northern Manhattan, they say, please do them a favor. Please save their homes and do not do an increase. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next three speakers are Graham Ciarulo, Maya Chaffee, and Sharon Cans. Good evening.
Good
Thank you
evening.
for coming in to testify.
Thank you for having us. I live in a building, my name is Graham Ciarulo, I live in Inwood. I live in a building with a beautiful courtyard. Every visitor I have ever brought to my building remarks upon how stunning our courtyard is. Just last month, our property owner installed a water feature in the courtyard center. However, the residents call the courtyard the honey trap because it lures ever more affluent apartment hunters into a building that typifies the abuses at the core of the New York housing crisis. Last year, tenants went for 7 months without gas and over a year without laundry. Tenants cope with cockroaches and rats. Top floor apartments have their own water features coming out of their ceilings. When things like the buzzer system break down, it can take up to a year to get fixed, and only after we file an HPD complaint. The property owner is now under investigation for illegally turning apartments, which should be rent regulated, into storage for the strip of restaurants on the ground floor. If that is not enough, there is a strong evidence that the property owner is violating the terms of its J51 tax abatement by using preferential rent leases to mask the fact that the apartments are rent regulated. The RSA wants us to believe net profits they have been making 4% or more in the past decade is not enough for them to maintain our building. But it is certainly enough for our property owner to install a fountain in our courtyard. But let's face the truth, the fountain is a better investment. The deplorable conditions push us out, and the honey trap courtyard brings in the wealthier tenants in an ongoing cycle. They turn over apartments like savvy restaurant owners turn over tables. That is where they will invest their rent increase. This is a sick system. But the RGB has the power to send a message to property owners. Freeze the rent on both 1 and 2-year leases and let them know that it will remain frozen until the RSA and the whole real estate injury clean up their act.
Thank you. Maya Chaffee.
Hello.
Good evening.
Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you
My
for
name
coming
is
in to
Maya
testify.
Chaffee. Hi.
Thank you for coming in to
Thank you.
testify.
I am a 25-plus year tenant at 91 East 3rd Street of Doreen Alderman, who was a landlord who petitioned for rent increases, I understand, on Tuesday. I don't believe her. I have never been in arrears on my apartment. I'm a dancer and a single mom. My apartment was never painted or improved over 25 years. She needs money to pay her lawyers because she is a serial harasser. She has brought unfair and frivolous lawsuits against me and my fellow tenants. She brought an eviction case against me while she knew that I was attending my dying father in California. She also tried to get me to pay over $10,000 to move my stove, which she said that my 21-year-old daughter and her two 20-year-old roommates had moved while I was taking care of my sick father. My daughter has succession rights and was living in my apartment at that time while I went back and forth between New York and California. My landlord, Doreen Alderman, is negligent. She allowed a known bedbug infestation to spread unchecked for 2 months in the building. She did not notify the neighbors of the infested apartment. This caused our apartment to become uninhabitable for 5 months, during which time she ignored my pleas for a rent abatement, knowing that I was suffering taking care of my dad. This cost me over $10,000, caused my daughter to drop out of college, and caused her much emotional distress. She is to this day traumatized. She has a pattern of harassment, intimidation, and baseless eviction threats. I know personally of 4 of my co-tenants who had to move out because of her negligence, her harassment, and her intimidation. We had our elevator out for more than a year with tenants on the 6th floor who are handicapped and seniors who could not get up and down those 6 flights for more than a year. It would take my fellow tenant an hour to get down or up those steps. The Department of Buildings ruled that we should get an abatement for that time. It would have been over $70 a month for me, but I was never offered that abatement. We also were without cooking gas for over 5 months between 2015 and 2016. She offered us a measly abatement of $50 a month. I want to know who can eat in New York for $50 a month when you're eating out of your house.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sharon Cans. Good evening. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for hearing me. My name is Sharon Cans. I'm the president of the Tenants Association, Upper West Side, 50 West 93rd Street. My landlord is one of the wealthiest in New York, and they're buying buildings like you wouldn't believe. And it's amazing considering every time I speak to them about something the tenants might need, they're saying, but we don't have the money. So I go on begging and they go on rejecting. I'd like to say that tenants in my building were reduced from 125 to now 70 people. We are paying for things like the roof, the hallways, the lobby, everything that makes the building more habitable for very wealthy people that are coming in the building now. I'd like to speak for a moment about my personal situation. I'm retired. I don't get any additional income. My daughter's living with me. Although she has a college education and a city full-time job, she can't afford to be in our neighborhood or any other in New York City at the moment. And thank goodness that there is RGB because of what you've done in the past couple of years. It has enabled me to pay my co-pays for my medical care, which have been extensive now. And I'm hopeful that you're hearing us and that you will grant us a rent freeze. Thank you.
Thank you. The next 3 speakers are Aldo Ponteroso, Kelvin Rojas, and Esperanza Rojas.
That's essentially what I'm going to say, but it's slightly
Good evening.
My name is Aldo. I'm from Assemblymember Linda Rosenthal's office. She regrets that she can't be here herself this evening. She's asked me to read her testimony, but I'll read a slightly abridged version to keep it under the 2 minutes.
Thank you.
I write to comment on the New York City Rent Guideline Board's proposed rent increase of 0.75% to 2.75% on 1-year leases and 1.75% to 3.75% on 2-year leases. As a long-time advocate for affordable housing and tenants' rights, it is disheartening to see the RGB doubling down on last year's decision to abandon a rent freeze and instead increase rents for the 2nd year in a row. A 2-year rent freeze is not enough to reverse decades of unfair, unrelenting, and economically unjustifiable rent increases. I urge the RGB to change course and reconsider its decision to hand yet another rent increase to rent-stabilized tenants. I challenge the RGB to right a historic wrong and roll back the rent for all rent-stabilized tenants across New York City. The RGB has proposed these rent increases while New York City continues to suffer through a protracted affordability housing crisis that has seen rents skyrocket. In 2016, the American Community Survey reported that nearly 60% of New Yorkers spend more than 30% of their income on rent, making them rent burdened by federal standards. A study by StreetEasy in 2017 showed that rents in New York City are increasing twice as fast as income. The number of New Yorkers turning to shelters has grown commensurately, with over 62,000 homeless people in the shelter system as of March 2018, over a third of whom were children. Rent-stabilized housing, created to insulate working-class New Yorkers and their families against out-of-control rents during a prolonged housing emergency, is no longer helping to maintain affordable rental housing stock. According to the 2017 New York City Housing Vacancy Survey, median income for rent-stabilized tenants in New York City in 2016 is $44,000, roughly $44,000. And the RGB itself has found that the majority of rent-stabilized tenants cannot even afford to pay that rent. In light of these statistics, it is shocking that the RGB would even be considering anything other than a rent freeze. Thank you.
Thank you.